This is the War Room Roundtable podcast, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant businessmen and women on the planet. Hear their stories and get the most important business lessons they've learned on the road to success, and get exclusive advice on how to implement their successes into your life and business. The War Room Roundtable is brought to you by your hosts, Jason Miller, CEO of Strategic Advisor Board, and Phillip Lanos, CEO of Own the Rhythm, and former podcast host for Entrepreneur and Inc. magazine. Welcome to the War Room. JR, how's it going?
Good, man. How are you guys? Good to see you.
Good to see you, man. Good to see you. We've met in person, and now we're taking care of business over the internets.
Absolutely,
so
yeah.
The interwebs.
The interwebs. Man. It's weird because usually it's the other way around, you know?
Right.
Listen, man, we start things off usually by asking what your origin story sort of looks like. What kind of examples of work ethic, professionalism, professions did you have growing up around you?
Awesome. So yeah, I came from a history. My father was in the lighting business for 40 plus years. I kind of grew up in it, and he was not home very much because he traveled to build his business. And I didn't want anything to do with the lighting business at all, even though it was kind of the legacy of my family. Went to school to be a pilot. Right about the time I was about to graduate, September 11th happened, and a lot of the flight regulations changed. And at the same time, I was also a district manager of Carmike Cinemas. And Carl and Mike that started Carmike Cinemas, they sold out to an investment company about the same time, and they were about to let go of a lot of their district managers. And I had saw some of the writing on the wall that I was about to be next, and I'd gotten a business degree and obviously a piloting degree, and I decided to give my dad a shout and said, "Hey, what about this whole lighting thing that I don't want anything to do with? What about if I come talk to you and see how this thing goes?" And I was there for about 22 years in different facets of the lighting business. I worked where he was hanging lights, just started like learning how to do electricity really, and went from there to being an outside salesman, doing high-end residential lighting design, and then went to owning a lighting company that represents a bunch of different lighting manufacturers. And then me and my ex-wife that owned this company together, we got divorced, different personal reasons for that, and went on to be on the manufacturing side. So I worked for the largest lighting manufacturer in the world up to just a couple months ago when I decided to do a little something different. And I have two young girls, and I wanted to do something to leave a legacy with them. And I decided that I always wanted to kind of jump into this whole entrepreneurial spirit and also be able to leave them a legacy, and also really get out of the lighting business. I didn't really have a passion for it, even though I was pretty good at it. So I went and actually bought a couple of Firehouse Subs, believe it or not, franchise locations, and also started a little small remodeling construction business. And then me and a friend of mine who has been on this show before, Matt Russell, he started a company, and I bought into co-ownership with him, and so I went from 0 companies to 4 this year with that whole entrepreneurial mindset. So really trying to do something that I could leave a legacy for my daughters in the process too. So that's kind of where this all kind of left. It's where I'm at today.
I mean, that's how you do it, man. That is how you do business. Wow. Talk about a journey.
Crazy.
And you had hunkered down and went ahead and threw yourself in, wholeheartedly invested into something you knew you didn't want to do, but it apparently taught you a few things about business. Is that accurate? Fair to say?
It did. It taught me how to be a leader. It taught me how to, honestly, I think the most important thing it did, it got me into the large corporate America world and see the goods and the bads and ugly of that, if you will. And realized that I didn't want to be in a scenario where I worked so hard for someone else's dreams and then really inside of someone else's dreams that I didn't really believe in ethically or morally, or again, I didn't have a passion for. So I told my wife, I said, I want to be an entrepreneur. And she's like, well, if you don't do it now, you're not going to ever do it. And then here I am. So
yes,
it's been a wild year.
Well, before we go any further, I want to check in with Jason because I know he's loving this story.
Yeah, it's an amazing story of transition, right? It's a transitional story of going through things and figuring out, well, do I love this? Do I hate this? It's okay. It's making me a living, but there's this like hole right here in your chest, and it's there, and you've been ignoring it forever, and then you filled it this year. So that's awesome, man. I mean, especially to go from all of that to transitioning into having what you have now, especially big brand names, right? I mean, that's good stuff. You're living a dream that most people will never even get to. They'll never even get to like the wheels on the car to start that, right?
Yeah. I truly believe that you can't walk through one door if you don't take your foot out of the old door. That makes sense. Right. Or close the door behind you. And I've been living with one foot in and one foot out for a long time. And like I said, I told my wife, I said, now's the time. She's like, okay, I believe in you. And I know the mindset that you have and the leadership skills you have, and we can do it. She has a job that's able to function for us from a family perspective at this, while this whole thing is getting up and running, and it's going so far so good. It's been a couple months in, and it's been really, really strong.
That's a key thing. Yeah. It's a key thing to highlight right there, right?
Yeah.
Is you have a support structure around you that is willing to support you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, my kids now, it's funny every time they meet somebody new, they introduce, hey, I'm JR, and this is my daughters. And the first thing they do, I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. My 4-year-old goes, he's the Firehouse guy. Well, yeah, that's me. So it's funny.
Good stuff.
Oh, man. I mean, for me, that's definitely the pinnacle of business success, is doing something in a way where it's setting you on the trajectory for where you want to be, right? Because a lot of people, and I in particular fall into this fault, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, where if I'm not even there yet, that's the problem. Where what I'm learning just from being with Jason on many of these conversations, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, as cliche as that sounds. And your journey has been insane, but now that you're on this trajectory, I can see the difference between when you were talking about what you've been through versus where you are now and how excited you are about that. And I feel like that's important, right? Because that's an indication that you're on the right path. And I mean, that's the all-time high. So if you could go back, knowing what you know now about where you are right now, and speak to yourself that day that you made that call before you went in and said, hey, that thing that I didn't want to do anything with, tell me all about it. Knowing what you know now, having lived on the other side of that, what would you have said to that person there who was about to make that decision and did actually make that decision?
Well, that's a great question, because I can tell you, I was at a place, again, I, had gone through schooling to learn a specific trade. And then I was also, had a job as a leader, if you will, of a couple of different movie theater chain businesses. And all that was just kind of taken out from under me. And whether right or wrong, or my decision or my function or reasonings for that or whatever, the main thing was I was so down and depressed. I thought that I had no other choice just to do something I did not want to do, but I had to. And now I look back on it going, you just got to take the leap of faith. If you have something you want to do, if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to be a business leader, if you want to be an executive somewhere, if you have that idea, that mindset of that want to, you got to find something you have a passion for, and you got to just step out in faith. I mean, it's not something you can just, slow into, or you just got to step out there,
There's always a choice.
There's always a choice.
Yeah. I mean, that's a hell of an answer, man, especially because, like you said, you thought you had no choice. And now that you're on the other side, you're like, if I would have just had some faith, and man, but that's the hardest part, right? That's the hardest part, is to take steps towards things you cannot even see yet. That's
Well, I'm a big sports fan, and I love golf, and I love watching football. And you always hear about golfers who miss 3-foot putts because they have the yips, or the field goal kicker that can't hit a 30-yard field goal because they've had the yips. And what it comes down to is they've seen themselves fail so many times, and they're scared to do it again. Now, I just got to a point where, like, if I fail, okay, I fail. I can't not do it just because I'm scared of failing. I teach. I'm also a pastor of a pretty large church in Nashville, here where I live, and what I've learned very similarly when teaching other leaders in the church function is that people get so scared of fear. What I try to tell them is fear can put you in a ball. It can put you in a suppression field, but it also can keep you alive. For instance, if I'm walking by a cliff, I know it's a 100-foot cliff. If I know I walk off that cliff, I'm going to die, right? So what do? I don't get close to the cliff. But sometimes you got to take somewhat of a close path to it to get around the curve, if you will. And this point in my life where I just had to, like, okay, I got to get a little close to the edge, but I know I'm not going to fall off. I just keep on going straight, and I'll get around the curve,
Yeah, or as Jason likes to call it, the bleeding edge, right?
Bleeding edge. That's awesome.
It's the bleeding edge, man. There's no doubt about that. But business, you have to live on the bleed. You have to spend time there. You don't want to live there, but
Right.
You got to spend some time there. There ain't no doubt about it.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, man. No, I love the conversation and what we've been able to uncover so far, just between the three of us, and the flow that it had, because it left, I think, a serious impression for anyone listening on exactly what it means to pay the cost to be the boss, and how you could have done it sooner. But sometimes lessons like that, it's far few and in between are people who learn it early, and hopefully people who are listening can learn that from you and use that to propel their own trajectory, or others can be reminded of a time they made a similar decision as well and can reflect on where they are now. I think both ways it serves to be valuable. With that said, there is really only a few things left to do in this episode. The first of which being, we have supporters who make podcasts, conversations like this possible. And for this episode in particular, we have Stephanie Emmett, who runs a company called The Right Stephanie, and that's WRITE, right? The Right Stephanie. She's a copywriter by trade, and into the marketing world, and she herself has seen the struggles of what it means to be online, and anyone who's ever tried to digitize their business will immediately come face to face with the fact that there's a lot of noise, and how you write something matters big time. So if you ever found yourself going, I don't even know what I should be doing. I tried all the things and all the things aren't working. I wrote the thing and nobody cared. Well, there's a little bit of craft to it, and Stephanie can help you do that. So all you have to do is go to The Right, again, that's WRITE, Stephanie.com. And you enter the code War Room, she'll give you 10% off and help you get to where you need to be. And that's the kind of person that you work with them once and you get a lot of value. So you don't have to worry about, what that might entail. And that's why we're supported by them, because we believe in them, right? We don't just take anybody on. So take that for what it's worth. And I want to now turn the conversation over to you again, JR. If people want to get a hold of you, connect with you, where should they go and what should they know?
I'm on Instagram. I'm on quite a few other places. You can email me at jr.edens, my last name, at firehousesubs.com. I also have a podcast that's a little bit spiritually led with a couple of daddies who actually call it the Daddy Discussions podcast. So you can reach me out there. It's just three dads talking about how to be a dad. So on there, and also you can hit me up on all the social places, JR Light Lines, which is my former lighting setup. So any place like that, you can reach out to me. Right
on. Now, before I turn it over to the final question, I want to just check in with Jason. You feeling good about it, Jason? Over here for the
yeah.
All right. So the grand finale And I told you about this earlier, but it's something that we love asking everybody who comes on the show. And that is, Jared, if you could have invited anybody to be a part of this room today, whether just listening or entering the discussion with us, who would you have loved to have had here and why?
So again, I'm a pretty spiritual person, and I think the easy answer when you're talking religion would be Jesus. But I'm going to kind of pivot from that and actually go Paul. He's a man that wrote a lot of the New Testament, and he was also a very direct person. Whenever you read some of the stuff that he wrote, very, very, very loving, very helping, but also very direct. And I would love to just have a conversation about, his journeys. He traveled all over the world, at the known world at the time. I just love to have him on and just ask him some questions. So he'd be the person I would go to.
Right on. Right on. We must seek counsel where we find that it fuels the soul, and in entrepreneurship and in business, never is it more important, and we can learn this from this conversation today, to have faith, right? To have trust in the process is another way of saying it. But there's really only so much a human being can predict, right? And it's all based on current data. So you can't see into the future, but you have a gut feeling about how things are going. And that right there, that requires commitment, because if you don't commit, you end up with, I think you called it the yips.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, man. And I think there's been some incredible lessons here that can be played back to back to back for anyone who really needs that convincing. With that said, it's tradition here for Jason to close us out. So I'm going to turn it over to him, but it's been a pleasure, man.
Yeah. Awesome. I mean, it's a wonderful story of transitioning from, a place a place maybe you wanted to be, to then a place that it wasn't in your heart, and then to a place now of new, right? It's a new place. It's exciting. You're creating, you're doing, you're making a difference. And God, what a better place to do it with Firehouse Subs. My God, what a fantastic organization with an awesome mission, right? To really help people and help our firefighters. Oftentimes people talk about, well, our military and all this. I mean, I served for 23 years, but I personally support Homes for Heroes because it's not just military. It's military, firefighters, police officers, nurses, doctors, all the different service to all those places serve our country in one way or another. Maybe it's not going across the pond with a weapon, but everybody doesn't need to do that to serve. Right. So, thank you for, serving that community the way that you are. It's very, very important. And what you're doing is its own mission in itself. So be very proud of that for sure. And I usually don't give shout outs, but last week we had a fantastic guest on that is part of the Tony's Toy group. And, as we're kind of going through life and, there's so much going on. Kids are inundated by screens, right? It's like, here, go sit down and watch iPad and do this, that, and the other, which we didn't even have that when we were kids, right? And so they've created this interactive toy. It's a cube, and you take these, animals, it's all themed, and you pop it in there, and then it's interactive. There's no screens. And it's like we've forgotten how to have that tactile interaction stuff with our children. So today I just been mentioning it on every podcast because it's a way for parents to get away from that. So it's tonys.com, TONIES.com. And it's a fantastic toy. And I personally am endorsing it because I just think it's cool. So anyway, thank you for being on the show. We all have the same 168, and you took a little bit of time to come here and spend it with us. And I'm grateful for the time that we've had. Thank you very much, my friend.
Thank you very much. It's been awesome.
Right on.
All right.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the War Room Roundtable with your hosts, Jason Miller and Phillip Lanos. please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and always remember, if you can dream it and believe it, then you can go achieve it. We'll see you in the next episode.